How's it going, everyone? So in this video I wanted to do something a bit different and basically do a tutorial covering a bunch of useful kind of Ableton tools. So this kind of takes me back to the very first tutorial I ever did on quick basslines, where I essentially created a rack which today is our most popular resource, called the Quick Melody Bassline Generator. So I essentially created this rack to do a process and help me do it more easily, and this kind of inspired more ideas afterwards on like how I can work a lot faster. So I've designed this collection called Ableton Tools with this in mind. Most of these are actually available for free, but there's also the full kind of collection, so anyone that wants like the full most up-to-date version with bonus racks and lifetime updates, then that's only available in the bundle. So that's kind of like the premise of this tutorial. I'm essentially going to be running through kind of a selection of the tools available, basically telling you what they do, suggesting some use cases for them, and hopefully convincing you that some of them might be useful for a specific thing that you're struggling with, and hopefully giving you inspiration to pick it up. So let's just get straight into it. So I think the best way to kind of showcase everything that's in this collection is with a live project example. So I've got this kind of project that I've been working on in the last week. When you get the bundle, it basically looks something like this inside. And the first part is essentially like these audio effect racks. So basically ways you can kind of process your sounds. There's some pretty interesting ones in there, but there's kind of like Resonator Selecta rack, which is quite cool. I think I've showed this on a tutorial before, the kind of 5 creative tools for minimal house, but I'll just kind of show an example. Okay, so we've got this top loop, and what we can essentially do is use the resonator to kind of make it more metallic. And it's got loads of different presets, and what you can do is you basically choose the kind of root note. So for this, we're in B minor, so it's probably better going down to B. And you can basically turn anything from a rhythmic source to a kind of harmonic source. So it could be a really good way to create like quick inspiration from rhythmic loops. I've got this rack here. So basically this is this kind of like vocoder trick. So it's a rack I set up, and what I essentially would do is I would load 2 layers. I would have an audio channel like this. And what I would then do is I would go and find some kind of carrier. That could work. And we will, on the wet channel, pick the carrier. And then what you do is you can basically play around with the settings. So you've basically got the kind of vocoder source, but the way I've kind of set it up is you're splitting it into 2 channels. You've still got the drums, but it allows you to kind of blend both layers as opposed to just using the dry wet knob. So it basically allows you to kind of do the inverse of what we did with the resonator effect and turn a rhythmic layer into a melodic one. But we've got this kind of like stab enhancer. So basically different like ways to kind of enhance your synths. I find in general with like synths, I've spoken about this for bass, basically setting up kind of these quick chains that you can quickly apply to sounds, as opposed to going through that process every time of choosing a sound, adding reverb, EQ, compression, delay, finding a new sound for another layer, adding those same effects. You might as well just save yourself some time and set up chains you know work in most cases and tweak. So that's kind of like the thought process behind a lot of these kind of instrument processing chains. We've got the Hass effect, which is a pretty common technique to basically make your sounds wider in the mix. So if I just take this for example, it's basically like playing with how you perceive a sound without. You'll see it sounds wider, but the kind of change is very subtle. So it's a very handy technique you can try. What else do we have? This kind of mixing rack is essentially like all the kind of basic effects. So I could add gain to an element without affecting the channel. I could reduce all the lows, maybe for a breakdown. So this would be a good element to include on like groups for like automating during breakdowns. Because you'd basically have a number of different things you could automate, like your filters, your reverbs, delays, and gains. So this would ideally be a really handy tool just for if you wanted to automate things and keep things interesting. And then the final one is one I sometimes get asked about, and it's this kind of like master chain. Most of the time it makes my mix louder, but it just kind of gives it that kind of final polish, which doesn't replace mastering engineers. But if you want to kind of create that rough DJ master to test out on systems yourself before release, then a rough kind of DJ master is generally the way to go. So basically, my whole mix, it's mostly like a dynamic change, but as you'll see, there's like boosting a bit of the low end and boosting a bit of the high end before doing the kind of dynamic changes. So if you listen to the difference, so that's without and with. So you'll see an immediate volume change. But some of the frequencies are adjusted as well. So that is essentially the audio effects. So the next section that you'll see is like these instruments. So these are basically like presets I've kind of designed for specific purposes. The first kind of preset I've got is this one called All You Need Is Acid. Essentially an acid generator plus an instrument. So what I'll do is I will go for the key we're in. So you might be familiar, this is kind of like the quick bassline tool setup, but within it we've got this kind of Ableton stock patch. So for anyone that doesn't have the kind of main acid plugins like your ABL and those kind of things, it's kind of a decent alternative. You've got frequency. I can adjust the pattern because it is an acid generator in theory. So just a quick and easy, simple kind of acid patch. I've used the same kind of principle for this one, but it's kind of like an Arp plucky kind of sound. So I'll just play a chord or something. So if you want to integrate an Arp kind of sound into your project, so the kind of premise of these kind of instruments is basically to give you like really specific sounds that you can just quickly throw into your project, and you can replace them later on if you want for perhaps better quality sounds, but the kind of patches stand quite well on their own anyway. But the kind of This one here, it's kind of for like shaping sounds, like using granular synthesis. Kind of ideal with this is you can drop any kind of one shot in. This example is kind of like a percussive, glitchy kind of one. Kind of like an electric tom. So I've kind of mapped kind of some of the key kind of parameters, and it kind of works off granular synthesis, and you can create these kind of, you can create loads of different sounds. You can create like percussive sounds, you can create effects, textures. I can adjust the start point, and within one sample you'll find thousands of different tones the shorter the sample goes. And you can like properly zoom in, and because it's looped, when it's incredibly short, you basically get these that could be a bass line. And then you can automate, create effects and tones and stuff. That's an effect, like a build. So this kind of device just shows like how easy it is to come up with sounds, like really original ones, just from dropping a sample in and manipulating using granular synthesis. So that is essentially the instruments. So the final part of the bundle is the kind of like MIDI effect racks. These are essentially designed to kind of help you write MIDI patterns more easily and kind of find sound potential. I've spoke about the Octave Transposer before with regards to like bass lines. So a lot of presets will be designed at different octaves, and kind of having that way to play back patterns based on different sounds quickly is going to be very useful for you in kind of deciding what works and what doesn't. So I've spoken about this kind of tool, the Octave Transposer, that I've created, where it basically gives you a quick way to kind of flick between octaves. Some keyboards actually have octave buttons on them. I know like the Ableton Push has an octave up and octave down button, so you can quickly transpose patterns, as opposed to having to go into a clip, transpose it up, and do that for all the kind of clips if you realize later on that it's not quite right, or if you change sound, for example. So it's basically giving you a really easy way to addition sounds. The kind of main function of this device is for transposing, but you can equally use it for layering. So you can basically turn on these kind of icons, and you can basically have the pattern play back at multiple octaves as well. So this might be particularly useful for like chords. So I've basically got so it basically saves me going into a pattern. I can keep the pattern simple. Like for this one, it's literally just one note. It's one of those like single line patterns. You can transpose it up a seventh with the chord device, and then I can choose the kind of octave range. So that kind of device and transposing in general is a great kind of practice to get into when you're auditioning presets. And then the final ones are this kind of like Rave chord stabs one. So I can essentially I'll load the variation with the key device, and then I can basically, let's just find an instrument. This is kind of how I'd use it. You'd get it like this. You'd pick the key you're in. You'd put it all the way right to the minor. And you'd pick what chord you want. A minor one, a seventh, a ninth, I'll maybe add a filter. So I'm quickly able to get these kind of stabby kind of chord patterns. They don't just have to be for rave stabs, but the kind of chord combinations are made for those kind of stabs. So nice stabby pattern, and then I can bring the kind of tutorial back full circle, add these kind of instrument processing racks. So that's essentially this kind of rack, and essentially a few of my favorites from the collection. So yeah, that's basically gonna be it for this tutorial. I hope it kind of gave you a better idea of the kind of tools we have available, and also gave you a bit of inspiration if you kind of wanted to go down the route of kind of creating your own tools to suit your own workflow. I'll leave a link to the kind of bundle, which I'll leave on discount as well for anyone that's watched this tutorial. As always, if you can leave this video a like, comment what you want to see next, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.